You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
And what's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome back to the LA Football Show here in the LA Football Network. If you're on radio on the Mighty 1090 ESPN, thanks for joining us, and welcome back to segment 2 here. If you're on podcast, this is our UCLA show. I'm glad to be back after being away on vacay. Well, the Madman and Will, the Thrill, Dirty Tie Decker held down the fort for me. So I already gave you the praise on the first segment on Radio Jamal, but well-deserved more praise. Thanks for holding the fort down, running the show well, being the capitone on the ship and driving it and steering it very, very correctly. So, but excited to be back and talking all things Bruins, your beloved Bruins, UCLA, who are going to be at Pac-12 Media Day in Vegas. Myself and will be there. You'll be there in spirit. But excited, my friend, to get into it with you and kind of break down what we expect to see from Chip Kelly and company. So how you doing? And thanks again for all you do.
Absolutely, Ryan, and really excited to have you back, number one, and number two, to talk about the beloved Bruins here and segue into what the expectations are for this season. I think there's a lot to sort of uncover with UCLA, and I think with Chip and his relationship with the media, it's always very hot and cold. So it's going to be really an interesting dynamic to see Chip sort of interacting with the media. I have actually noticed him in the offseason be a lot more relaxed, a lot more friendly with the media, a lot more sort of confident in his own skin than he was last year. And it'll be fascinating to see if that carries over now into Pac-12 Media Day, because it's all been kind of at the friendly confines of the Wasserman Center on campus. He's felt very comfortable all across the offseason. Let's see how now that translates when, the fearsome 5 that cover UCLA now becomes kind of the fearsome 50, and he gets some national press as well. So it'll be really interesting to see the Chip dynamic.
Always is. And, I think you agree with this. I think we talked about it. I mean, I thought Chip stole the show last year at Pac-12 Media Day in LA. I thought he was fantastic. Like, he was full of humor. He's kind of that dry exterior, but more friendly. You and Will obviously asked very good questions, very poignant, very football related questions. And you could tell he was very appreciative of that. But even to the media that asked their normal, in my opinion, dumb questions, he had fun with it. So I thought Chip stole the show last year, and now in the bright lights of Vegas, I mean, who knows what we're going to get from
Who knows
Chip.
what we're going to get. I think that's always been, Ryan, the sort of the chicken and the egg, the dichotomy, a little bit of the frustration with UCLA fans sometimes when it comes to Chip, because we see it. He's capable of being a very charismatic guy. I think that was evident with Joel Klatt earlier this week. Joel Klatt was essentially in awe of Chip in terms of the way Chip answered questions intellectually, culturally, socially, on the field. I mean, it just spoke to how multidimensional he is. I'll be very honest with you. Chip Kelly was the only one who could have had that interview. I mean, you couldn't have had that level of depth across so many different subjects with Nick Saban, with Kirby Smart, with Lincoln Riley, with Jimbo Fisher. I mean, on it goes. It really was Chip Kelly being one of one. And I think the best way to kind of get him going is start with football, have him sort of, give that respect and that ode and that appreciation. And then I think there'll be an opportunity to branch out. But so many delicious storylines here, Ryan, for UCLA. Yeah. I think, and I know you and I are going to get into it, but I think quarterback competition is going to be front and center. I think how he sort of thinks about that wide receiver room. I think the news of DeAnton Lynn becoming UCLA's first $1 million coordinator, and on and on. I think there's a lot of different elements here to delve into with UCLA, given that now Chip has his extension, albeit maybe not as long as, he would like, but he's secure now for the next 2 to 3 years. And what is he going to do here with that added runway?
Yeah. Just going back quick to that Joel Klatt interview. First of all, I mean, I've been a huge fan of Joel Klatt. I always respect him so much. And what a good interview. I mean, we talk about Chip all the time. We talk about all the time, Jamal, how fortunate UCLA fans need to feel to have Chip Kelly. I understand there's some frustration in terms of results in the field and how long it's taken to get. But when you look at, they are where they need to be now, being a 9-win team on the cusp of 10 just last year, but also just all the off the field stuff that Chip Kelly brings that you don't get from some other coaches. I mean, yes, winning is, some people say, everything, and it's obviously very important. It's what pays the bills. It's when you're a fan, it's what you care about. But when you really look at what these young men are getting in this program, like, it is unparalleled to others. And you see what happened at Northwestern just last week. You see what happened with all the other scandals around the country. And that doesn't happen under Chip Kelly and under the UCLA watch. And so I think that needs to be said. I loved his quote that there's no crying on the yacht. That was a great quote. He knows how great they have it in Westwood. He knows how great they have it in college football, period, when you're an athlete there. And they embrace the new dexterity of college football with NIL, with transfer portal. So he's not like the Nick Saban or I'm drawing a blank. Clemson head coach. Dabo, who's like crying salty about the NIL. Like, he'll embrace it, but he's also saying, like, hey, we're very fortunate. Like, there's no crying on the yacht. We have it good here, and things could be a lot worse. So just want to throw it out there. It was a great interview. And if you haven't watched it, got to check it out.
It's important to take a step back and understand just, what UCLA is, a top 20 school in the world, in the hills, cutting across Bel Air and Brentwood and Beverly Hills, iconic campus. The Wasserman Center and the facilities are top notch. You've got a director of leadership from the United States Naval Academy. I mean, There's just, books and ball, just everything that UCLA represents. And, this is a fun little dig here, Ryan. I'm sure our Bruin fans will appreciate this. So much hype, so much conversation across town with USC's new football center. And you look at that rendering of the football center, it looks like the Wasserman Center in Cardinal and gold. Like, USC has made such a hype over the next now 3 to 4 years of getting these sort of exclusive football facilities, which they will be, but it's essentially to catch up to UCLA. And I think that recognizing that is really important. And I think Chip kind of gave a subtle dig to that in his own sort of nuanced way. And he's absolutely the right guy for this job. And I've said it time and again, and I'll keep saying it. I want Chip Kelly here until he retires for the next 12 to 15 years. And I want Jerry Neuheisel to take over immediately after that. I mean, that to me, if I'm a Fortune 50 CEO, that's my succession plan for UCLA football to set it up for success.
Yep. No, 100%. I'm in agreement there as well. And this season, to me, which is segueing now into this Pac-12 Media Day, is this will, I think, define Chip Kelly's tenure so far as head coach of UCLA. He had taken over. I know there was some winning under the previous regime, but then he kind of took over a bare bones cabinet, if you will. Or even if it wasn't bare bones, he kind of wanted to rebuild it his way and do things differently his way, and had a lot of young talent, and obviously DTR being a true freshman starting, and just kind of slowly built it how he wanted to. Last year, we saw the pinnacle of that class with DTR, being his fifth-year senior, having Zach Charbonnet for the second year who decided to return, having the great Jake Bobo who transferred over, and we saw a lot of success. Had the one bad game against Arizona. Unfortunately, that's college football. But outside of that, I mean, yes, they lost USC, but it was a phenomenal game. They had a great season overall. But this is the year now after DTR, who wasn't his recruit. Everyone remember that. That was not his recruit. Yes, he had him all 5 years. But this is now he gets Dante Moore, or does he get, the other QBs that are jockeying for a position? He's playing the transfer portal like a true transfer genius, if you will. And so I think this is kind of the catalyst, or the microcosm, or the whatever descriptive words you want to use for what Chip Kelly means to UCLA. And this is the season where we'll truly see kind of how he can go about building success after the last regime has finally kind of moved on. And that's a good segue into D'Anton Lynn, who he brought in now as his new D coordinator, who we just learned is going to be the highest paid D coordinator I believe UCLA perhaps have ever paid, as the $1 million D coordinator. Yeah. Your thoughts on that overall? I was thrilled for him. Your thoughts on it?
I'm very excited about that, Ryan, that this is the first time UCLA has paid a coordinator over $1 million. And so I think it speaks volumes to where UCLA's commitment to football is moving forward, their understanding of what it takes to be competitive, but at the same time without losing who they are and the essence of what they believe in. And I think it also speaks tremendous that they're giving it to someone so young. And now when you talk about who the athletic director is, when you talk about who the defensive coordinator is, when you talk about these really exciting coaches on the staff, like Deshaun Foster, like Jerry Neuheisel, I think Chip doesn't get enough credit for how much he's embracing the youth movement. And so I think, you talk so much about now this is his quarterback and this is his scheme in terms of, the personnel that he's going to be able to accrue and has accrued over the last few years. This is truly his team, but it's also now his coaching staff, and he's been very forward thinking in that regard. And I think what's interesting, Ryan, to just go back to something you said earlier, what a mirror image situation we have between Chip Kelly and Lincoln Riley. We just talked a few minutes ago about this is the first time Lincoln Riley is going to have a quarterback for a second consecutive year in a very, very long time, since Baker Mayfield, since his very first quarterback at OU. And this is now the first year that Chip Kelly's going to have somebody other than DTR at quarterback. So it's totally flipped on its axes. And to me, I think the dominant questions, Ryan, for Chip, I think it's going to be threefold. One is A, B, and C is going to be who's going to be the quarterback. Is it Dante? Yep. Is it Garbers? How do you see that shake out? B, who do you see as the starting running back? So much of the national media right now is on Carson Steele. But you, me, Will, others who follow this team very closely, who are the boots on the ground, we believe very strongly in TJ Harden being the number one running back. So how he sees Harden versus Steele and what his giveaways are in that regard, I think is going to be significant. And then C, who's wide receivers 1 and 2 in terms of that room. I think it's evident that J. Michael Sturdivant is wide receiver 1. It's evident to me that Kyle Ford's number 2. So that means that your top 2 receivers are new players that weren't UCLA players last year. So how does he feel about the new versus the incumbent? So to me, it's going to be QB, running back, wide receiver, I think is going to dominate the questions in that order.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'll certainly be the dominant questions. And I think after that, if there's time, they kind of make you go, each coach has 20 minutes, I think. So you got to go pretty quick through them. And then after that, the big question will be the defense, because if there's anything that has held this team back in the time Chip Kelly's been there, it has been the defense. And we've talked a lot, Jamal, about how on paper, in our opinion, this is not just the most talented defense Chip Kelly's had since he's been coach, but arguably the most talented defense in the entire conference. I mean, you look top to bottom at the names on this roster on defense, they are very, very good. But I think the questions will be, what kind of output should we expect? What kind of scheme is D'Anton Lynn really going to instill? Will we see a lot of big plays given up again? Now, obviously, that's in my opinion, a dumb question for me to ask, because what coach is going to say, yeah, you're going to see big plays still given up. But I mean, that's a true thought process of this has been the Achilles heel of this defense. And how do you fix that? So I think that's my question to you, or that's our question for Chip, seeing what the defense has been, because they've even flashed last year, Jamal. Against Utah, they looked great against Utah. They buckled down in certain instances, and they gave up a lot of yards here and there, but they were really bend but don't break. And then they had a lot of good stands where they were actually forced 3 and outs and short possessions. So they showed flashes of doing really good things, and they showed flashes of against USC, against Washington in the second half, against Oregon at times, where it's just you couldn't stop a nosebleed. So that would be my question for Chip, and I'm curious your thoughts on it. It's just like, you have this new coordinator in D'Anton Lynn. We now know what his salary is going to be, which I don't think that matters too much, but people will think that matters. You're paying him the most you've ever paid a defensive coordinator. What makes you believe he will be able to make this defense a top defense in the conference?
No, I think it's a great question, Ryan. And I'll add some framing, in the sense that D'Anton Lynn is going to make 3 times the amount that Deshaun Foster is going to make this year. And when you talk about Deshaun Foster and the output that he has generated at the running back position to the NFL, and great running backs from Charbonnet to Demetric Felton to Josh Kelly to Britton Brown, and on the list you go, you're now paying a guy 3x what you're paying a guy who's repeatedly just churning out NFL players and NFL soon-to-be stars at his position. And so the question now becomes, given that, what are you really expecting from this group? Because the breakdown of this defense is as follows, Ryan. You've got Latu. You've got the Murphy twins that are exceptional pass rushers, Carl Jones Jr. You've got guys who can straight line get to the quarterback beautifully. You've got a really talented run stopper in Jay Toya in the middle of that line has shown tremendous flashes of being able to run stop.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the true rangy running linebackers that you have in Darius Moasau and Oladejo, and you got kind of this hybrid guy in John Vaughns, I mean, who's sort of a Derwin James of UCLA, that front seven is so talented. But the challenge that they've had in the past has been gap integrity. They almost go too fast to the quarterback. They lose their gap integrity. And there has been tremendous inconsistency in that secondary. And as a result of that, when that front seven overcommits, you have these gaping holes in the middle of the field because the secondary loses containment. And so the question for me becomes, you know what your strengths are. So what is D'Anton Lynn going to do to have controlled aggression in the front seven and dial up the aggression in the back end with the secondary? And what is he specifically doing there to sort of bridge that gap? Because it was that gap is what was really the linchpin to these problems with UCLA defensively. And so what is it about D'Anton Lynn, either X's and O's, leadership, relatability, training, preparation, diet, approach, mentality, meditation? What is it? And it's probably going to be all of the above to close that gap between the weaknesses of the front seven and the weaknesses of the secondary, to tighten up that as one cohesive unit. That would really be my question to Chip.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we'll have to relay that to him and see how he answers. Cause I think that, as you said in the beginning, the bulk of the media are going to talk about who's going to be quarterback, who's going to be running back, what's the offense. But the true kind of what we really need to know, I mean, quarterback obviously it's pretty important, let's be honest, but kind of important, kind of a big role. But outside of that, it is like, okay, what is this defense? Because if they can play to the caliber of their talent, Jamal, and we've been saying this all offseason, like this could be not just a Rose Bowl team, but this team could, if they get good, better than decent, if they get good quarterback play, it's got to be good, and they get the level of defense we think they can be, this team could not only compete for the Pac-12 and the Rose Bowl, but we could see them compete for the national title.
They could be in the playoff. There's no question about it, because when you look at the schedule, there's 3 tough games: at USC, at Oregon State, at Utah. And I think the other 9 games, I think everyone would sort of consider as being winnable games, regardless of whether it's Moore or Garbers or Steele or Harden is 1-2 in any order, or Sturdivant and whoever else becomes the wide receiver. So the question there becomes, and they can probably outscore their way in 8 or 9 of those games altogether. Where it's going to really matter is those 3 games to get physical. And so is this going to be a defense ranked 80, 90, 100 that shows flashes 1 every 3 plays, but the other 2 plays, they lose gap integrity or just average? Or are they going to be a defense in the 45, 55, 65 range where they are being aggressive and disciplined and doing the right things every play? And if they get beat because of exceptional quarterback play, you just tip your cap and move on, because that's going to happen a lot in the Pac-12 this year, given who's coming back at quarterback. But if they can do that, those 3 games, all of a sudden that goes from maybe 1 win out of those 3 to possibly 2 wins out of those 3 to possibly the whole shooting match. So that's really where this comes down to, Ryan. And I think I'm excited about the national media asking all the offensive questions because of a lack of intimacy with the team. But I think we're going to go in. Obviously, quarterback is important, asking that, but then really getting into the teeth of the defense, because that's going to be the compass for determining where this team goes this year. Yeah.
So my last question for you, Jamal, and we'll hopefully get to talk. Well, we will get to talk to him because he will be one of the representatives at Media Day, and we only have about a minute and a half here left. So unfortunately, got to be quick. But Laiatu is actually one of the few players that is getting a lot of national recognition at UCLA. Like, a lot of people are calling him a potential first-round pick and one of the top edge rushers in the entire college football. And obviously we've talked about his story, how amazing it is being, out of football because of injury, coming back and basically being the comeback player of the year last year. What's your expectation for Latu this year? Do you expect him to supersede even what he did last year and be kind of the face of college football when it comes to the edge rush?
I think it's going to be really challenging to sort of supersede what he did last year, because I think that he just had such an exceptional year. But I fully expect him to be double-digit sacks. And I fully expect him to be more of a vocal leader this year with the defense. And I think the combination of that, of kind of being the ultimate pass rusher, but then making those around him better, I fully expect him to be the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. That is his ceiling this year in terms of expectation, and I believe he'll get that.
Well, and the fact that Chip invited him and is bringing him with him to Pac-12 Media Day, I think says a lot. Says where he is as a vocal leader, where he is in his career and where he wants to get to, because Chip brings guys that are, leaders of men to these things. And obviously he views him as that, and that's just going to only help him in the draft process, which we got a long way to go from there because we got a whole season to play, but can't wait to see it. So, well, that's all the time we got for this episode. We will be in Vegas for Pac-12 Media Day. Cannot wait. Las Vegas Resorts, we're coming for you, and we'll have live coverage after the event. Jamal will jump back on with us, obviously, to break us all down. Myself and Will be there. But thank you all for hanging out with us right now. We'll be back with more updates soon. If you're on radio, we'll be back after the break with some pro talk with our Chargers and Rams.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.